2 days before Christmas, my side fence blew over, as you might have seen on the channel, and I had to do a bit of an emergency repair just before Christmas, which has stood up rather well. Many months later, it's now summer, so it's time to replace the fence. And I'm going to be using something slightly different. I'm going to be using this steel DuraPost system to see how it performs. And because I'll be DIYing it all myself, I'll let you know exactly how much it costs and how much you could save if you fenced yourself rather than paying a contractor. I start by taking out one fence panel at the end of the run so I can access the whole fence. And then using my brush cutter attachment on my strimmer, I clear a path next to the fence line, which I need to do so I can actually see what I'm dealing with. If you're going to clear things like stinging nettles with a strimmer, make sure you use the right PPE, including long trousers, as nettles get thrown in all directions at high velocity, including your legs. So now I've managed to clear all of this side section that's completely overgrown. At least I can see what I'm dealing with. And it's not very good news. So the first thing I noticed once I cleared this area is how the gravel board has pushed out, and in a lot of places it's not actually underneath the feather edge anymore. And that's why the feather edge has sunk between each post. Where there's a post, it's still quite high, but as you can see, if you look along, you've got this sort of post to post, and between the posts it must be maybe 100 mil down. That's because it's sagged, because it's got nothing to sit on anymore. And it's because we've got a bit of a level difference. In fact, in this area there's two gravel boards. There's the main one and they put another one underneath it. You see here as well, it's just sort of collapsed, which tells me there's more material the other side of the fence than there is this side. So that is a potential problem, because although I'm using steel fence posts this time, the rest of the fence is exactly the same. It's timber gravel boards, feather edge, and 2.4 metre centres. So I'm going to have to do something to make sure that that pressure of that earth isn't going to blow out the new gravel board and cause this major problem. So I'm going to have a think about that. I will let you know later how I'm going to deal with it. It's probably going to cost time and money. But in the meantime, I think we need a bit of demolition. All the boards on this existing fence are nailed in with just 18 gauge brad nails, so it doesn't take much to pull them off. And as for the posts, well, these are either totally rotten or partially rotten, so they can snap off just below ground level easily. What is interesting, now I've taken the fence down, I can actually get a decent look at these laurels, and they've somewhat grown a bit. You can see with the fence down how big the trunk is now. I would say that's about 1.5 inches, 45 millimetres across. Here's this one here, really quite chunky. They've definitely taken off compared to what they were like when I put them in 3 years ago as bare root laurels. And after the first year or so, where they just weren't thriving and they were really sort of struggling to take hold. And the other thing that's funny is some of these posts are so bad, I don't even have to demolish them, they just fall out. There you go, that's where the rot is. This is just as soft as anything. All my levels on this project I'm taking from a part of the old fence that's going to remain, and I transfer them accurately using an outdoor 360-degree rotating laser level that has a base station that you set up on a tripod, together with a handheld receiver that tells you when it's exactly level with the beam. And I can now use that to help me set the height of all my post rails and the depths of my holes. Rather than trying to remove all the concrete from each old post, I offset my new posts so they don't conflict and start digging 600mm deep holes at 2.4 metre centres along the run with my favourite post hole digger and narrow trenching shovel, which I still think is the quickest combination of tools to dig a post hole when you've got stones and possible bricks in the ground that powered augers will just bounce off. As I dig, the laser level helps tell me how deep I need to go, but I'm only using it because I have it. You can easily use a spirit level. However, if you're going to build an extension or a garden room or do major landscaping work on your property, I would recommend buying a rotating laser level like this. I'll put an Amazon link to the one that I'm using in the description below. The left-right position of my posts here is dictated by a 2.4 metre cant rail that I temporarily put in, and lined by an offset string line that I set up from one end of the new fence to the other. Any rocks or bricks I come across in the holes, I soon remove with my SDS drill. I've chosen these steel powder coated posts because they're light but strong and definitely won't rot like my timber posts did. There's another video I published recently all about different post types and the pros and cons of each, which I'll put a link to in the description below. You'll notice here I'm still filling the bottom of the holes with a couple of inches of gravel. Nothing to do with drainage, but it does help level my posts. It makes it easy to make small adjustments up and down when the post is sitting in gravel. I use a brace perpendicular to the fence, just clamped to my new post to hold it level. And with everything in place, I can now set my posts. Here I'm batching my own concrete, although you can use post mix if you don't mind paying the extra money. Although I had to keep the batches relatively small as the ground next to the fence isn't conducive to a fully loaded wheelbarrow. I fill each hole with concrete up to just below the bottom of the gravel board, tamping between the layers as I go. So while I leave that concrete overnight to get some strength, I thought I'd explain to you exactly what I've decided to do on the layout to get over this problem of the earth pushing against my new fence. And I've done a couple of mock-ups. This is the original fence, if you can imagine. This is the top with a gravel board at the bottom, and all backed by these 4-inch timber posts, the ones that have rotted away. And the way it's all held together is that there's two cant rails pinned to the front of the post, and that's what holds the feather edge. And at the bottom there's a 150 gravel board, a 6-inch gravel board, stuck onto the post with a bit of a block. That means there's absolutely no connection between the gravel board and the feather edge. So in time, what's happened is the pressure has gone onto this gravel board, it's pushed out and allowed the feather edge to drop down in the middle of each span. It's okay where the post is, but in the middle it's dropped down. That's why all the cant rails that I've taken off all bowed like a banana shape, because they've been holding the weight of all the feather edge with nothing supporting it at the bottom. So what I've decided to do on my new fence with my new steel powder coated post is, this is obviously higher because I'm putting in a higher fence, so I've got an extra cant rail at the top, and these rails actually just fit into the gap in the post. But the subtle difference is that at the bottom here I'm going to use a C24 CLS piece of timber rather than a cant rail, and it's spanning between the feather edge and the gravel board. That means that there can't be any movement between them, which means that the feather edge will always be sitting on the gravel board because they're all tied together. And using a piece of C24, which is essentially structural timber but it's treated, is going to be a lot stronger than using some sort of sawn cheap timber from the fencing yard. So if the pressure does come onto this bottom rail because the earth is pushing against it, it's got a better chance of staying where it should do because it's quite good structural timber. So I think all of that should mean that the fence lasts a bit longer. With the first couple of posts now fully concreted in, I can install my treated 3x2 timber level-wise spanning the feather edge and the gravel board. The top cant rail I install 150mm from the top of the fence using my laser level and an inverted staff, so it's exactly level throughout. And then I make a simple jig to position the middle rail hanging from the top rail, which just saves me time. The gravel board I fix to the 3x2 and level it in as accurately as I can, as this will set the level of the very top of the fence, which is the bit that everyone's going to see and notice if it's out of level or wavers at all. I'm using 150mm or 6-inch feather edge here, overlapping each one around about 25mm and nailing it into each of the 3 rails, just once on each one, so it doesn't split as it shrinks, using 60mm galvanised ring shank nails, but you can easily use external screws like decking screws for something like this. So when it comes to actually putting the feather edge on, it's almost identical to a standard wooden fence, but there is one important difference that I need to take care of. See, I want this feather edge to be continuous all the way along. I don't want it stopping at the posts. So I want it fly through the posts, but the thing I have to be a little bit careful of is that this board that actually covers the post really needs to be in the middle, so I can pin it where it needs to be pinned outside of the post, because obviously I can't nail into a metal post. So the last place I want it to end up is something like that, because I can't really nail it where I want to. And although I'm using a spacer that I've just made, this is 126mm, which over a 2.4 metre length works out near enough just right, so I'll end up with this in the right place. What I do need to do is, after about 2/3 of a panel, start measuring it out just to make sure it hasn't crept, just so it ends up absolutely in the right place. I can play with it a couple of millimeters plus or minus without anyone noticing, but I don't want any sort of major changes, because if you look down it, you'll see that in time. So I want this outside of the fence to be absolutely uniform. Something that's never mentioned in DIY videos is stamina, because to complete a 29-metre long fence like this on your own, or a bedroom or kitchen renovation, you need a certain stamina to keep going until the job is finished. Even when you're tired or dirty or aching from the day before, you need a certain perseverance to keep pushing on. To help me with this, I build the fence in 3 sections, each one almost complete before moving on to the next. That means I get a rest from either digging all day or mixing concrete. So I'm just setting up for my second concrete pour of 3. I'll just show you what I've got here. So what I found is that these diagonal braces, I mean, normally I'd put a stake in the ground, but these are so heavy. These are the gravel boards, 150 by 25 or 20 thick. They're so heavy that just sitting them on the ground there is plenty, just to give this post a bit of support with a clamp at the top there. I'm just using the cant rails, top and bottom, not in any specific position, but just top and bottom, just to space the posts exactly the right width apart. Let's go around the other side. So it's really handy using gravel at the bottom of these holes, but sometimes I just need to lift it a little bit higher. So I've just got a clamp here that's pushing rather than pulling, just to elevate it 20mm off the ground, just to get that at the right level. Level wise, I've set up my laser level, and this is just a datum that, if I turn over there, over the other side of the road somewhere, there you go, there's my laser level. So this is just a datum set up today for the position of that laser level, and if I put the receiver on, then you can see maybe that's 1 or 2 millimeters low. but good enough for me. So I've got 4 set up, 1, 2, and there's another 2 down there. So the plan this afternoon is to pour all of these. So that's going to add up to about 6 mixes, which is a fair amount of aggregate out of my bulk bag. But today, I've got a secret weapon. This is a 1,000-watt fully electric power barrow, which can move up to half a ton of material in its bucket without you even having to break a sweat. I've invested in this because I've got some major clearing work coming up in the paddock soon, and this will stop me having to hire something similar for a number of weeks, and obviously I can also use it whenever I need to. Having more wheels means it's a lot more stable than a wheelbarrow, and obviously that half-ton capacity means I don't need to make so many trips. On this second pour, I break out my poker vibrator, which really helps to get the concrete flowing around the posts and get rid of any air bubbles. So what do I think of the steel DuraPost system? Well, I like the fact that the posts are light, unlike concrete posts, and they're really easy to work with the timber rails. You just screw them in and it's fixed. In the centre of each post, between the rails, there's obviously a web of the H section. So each panel ends up just over 2.4 metres, which means there's a little bit of creep on each one, which you need to allow for. Also, the powder coating you need to take care of. It's really easy to damage these and end up with chips in your paintwork. I found all the accessories like post caps and trim on this system really expensive, so I designed the fence without the need for any of these because the money could soon add up. I'll put an Amazon link in the description to the posts for you to have a look at, but once again, if you're thinking about buying these, I found wicks to be a lot cheaper. So 11 out of my 12 panels are absolutely 100% complete. I've just got the last one here to finish off, and each panel is 2.4 metres wide, plus that little bit of creep because I've got these metal posts, which just gives it an extra few millimetres. So this last panel that's 2.4 metres gets me there. So I'm actually 100 mil short from this corner post that I was hoping to get to. It hasn't crept quite as much as I had hoped. But I've got a plan. I was going to put another post, another 4x4 inch post on the inside going up here to be able to support this corner bit that I'm going to have to sort out because it doesn't make sense once I've got this new fence in. But rather than putting it here, I'm going to have to now put it here. That makes up the 4 inches, so I actually finish okay. It's not that big a deal because at some point in the next couple of years, I think this fence is going to be coming down and the new one that I put in is actually going to continue on for another few metres in that direction. But putting the post here rather than here does solve a problem. So I'm almost to the end, and I've just worked out this 29 metre long fence has just over 300 components in total, would you believe? And this is the very last one. So while I fix this little bit of capping, go and have a look at the costs and potentially see how much I've saved. So these are the scores on the doors. I needed 11 intermediate posts at £35 each, and then a smaller one at each end, which just came in at 20 each. All the rails in the form of cant and CLS added up to £175, and the feather edge was the most expensive part of the timber, coming in just over £400. I use the equivalent of around about £200 of aggregate and cement, so the total is around £1,200, which for a 29 metre fence is equivalent to £100 per panel or £42 per linear metre. And when I compare it to what a contractor would charge, I reckon I've saved somewhere between £3,000 and £4,000. And that is it complete. So there you go, that is the fence 100% complete, and I'm really happy with it. I think it looks really smart, and it's a combination of modern with those fence posts and traditional with the feather edge. And after using these posts for the last week or so and sinking them into decent concrete, I think they're going to stand up to the wind and weather for a very long time. So with some general DIY skills and what you've learned in this video, to put up a fence like this is completely achievable for the average DIYer. All you need is a bit of motivation, stamina and perseverance if you want to save that money you would have given to the fencing contractor. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I will see you next time.